Good afternoon. Would you like to try and grab a seat? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm particularly delighted there's so many gentlemen this afternoon. Today, we are in the presence of giants, women of conviction and of courage, leaders in thought and deed. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who will lead and moderate our session today, has many remarkable lists of accomplishments, more so if you put them in the context of a woman of her generation, where very few women went to college, and even fewer women went to law school. But I suspect one of her many accomplishments many of you won't know about, and this is that Justice Ginsburg can do at least 20 push-ups, not girly push-ups on the knees, but real men push-ups on the toes. Dr. Shirin Ebadi also needs no introduction. She comes from Iran. She's a lawyer, former judge, human rights activist, and she's also the winner of the 2003 Nobel Prize, and Forbes has described her as one of the most influential women of all time. Shirin is, in fact, an old Persian name, and remarkably enough, in a new country like mine, Singapore, it's actually quite a popular name, both with the Muslim community and the Jewish community. So there you are. Our last speaker, but last but not least, a fellow member of the WJP board, is Chief Justice Gracie Northfleet, and she was the first woman judge to be appointed to the Federal Supreme Court of Brazil and was Chief Justice from 2006 to 2008. So please welcome women leaders in the rule of law. Thank you.
I thought we would start by introducing ourselves to you, speak a little bit about our background. I think all of us came of age when women faced overt barriers to careers that took them outside the domestic sphere. And so I've asked our panelists to tell you a little of their own life's course, the barriers they faced, and how they overcame the obstacles. As the oldest member of this panel, I thought I would make a few comments about my life's course. When I graduated from law school, women were perhaps 3% of the bar of the United States. There were no women in the federal courts. There was no anti-discrimination law. So to give you a picture of the world, the legal world that Justice O'Connor and I entered, we all did rather well in law school, but there wasn't a legal employer that would hire us. So what Sandra Day O'Connor did was she went to a county attorney and said, I will work for you without pay for 4 months, and then if you think I'm worth it, you can put me on the payroll. the object for women of our generation was to get the first job, because once you got the job, women tended to do very well. But it was getting that first job that was hard. In my case, I graduated from Columbia Law School, and a professor who was in charge of getting federal clerkships for Columbia graduate went to a judge who always hired people from Columbia and said that he recommended me. And the judge was fearful. He said, I might take a chance on a woman, but she's got a 4-year-old daughter. So the professor said, give her a chance. If she doesn't do well, there's a young man in her class who will take over. So that was the carrot. And then there was a stick, and the stick was, if you don't give her a chance, I will never recommend another Columbia Law student to you. So that's how I got my very first job in the law. So you can see that I am exhilarated by the changes that have occurred in just a couple of generations. I think that's enough to give you an idea of where I came from. And perhaps we'll ask Dr. Ebadi to tell us something about her career in the law.
من از یک خانواده مسلمان مدرن میام و در خانواده ما کاملا برابری حقوق دختر و پسر به وسیله خانواده اجرا میشد.
I come from a modern Muslim family, and in my family there was complete equality between the boys and the girls.
زمانی که رفتم دانشکده حقوق تقریباً از 250 نفری که در کلاس ما بودند فقط 40 نفر دختر بودند.
When I went to law school, we had 250 students in the class, but there were only a number of girls.
40 نفر.
40 girls.
بعد از اتمام تحصیلات من در امتحان مخصوص دادگستری شرکت کردم و شاهد اول شدم و شدم قاضی.
When I finished law school, then I had to pass an exam, which was by the Ministry of Justice. I passed that exam, I was the best, and I became a judge.
وقتی من قاضی شدم احساس می کردم که همکاران مردم و همچنین وکلایی که من اونا رو محاکمه می کردم در اوائل با تردید به کار من نگاه می کردند.
When I became a judge, I had this impression that the male colleagues and also the other lawyers who had to defend cases before me looked at my work as if doubtfully, with doubt.
اما من با کار بیشتر و بهتر خودم بر تردید اونها غلبه کردم. بعد از یه مدتی متوجه شدن که من هم همان توانایی‌های یک مرد قاضی رو دارم.
However, through more work and better work, I succeeded in overcoming their doubts, and after a while, they realized that my capabilities were just as good as my male colleagues or male judges.
یکی از کارهایی که در این دوران کردم مقالات مختلفی در زمینه مسائل حقوقی می‌نوشتم که توجه خیلی ها رو جلب کرد که من حقوقدان خوبی هستم.
One of the things that I achieved was to write a number of legal articles of such good quality that attracted the attention of a lot of people, and they realized that I was a good jurist.
و به همین دلیل من خیلی زود در شغل قضاوت ترقی کردم و در حالتی که خیلی اولین زن جوانی بودم که شدم رئیس دادگاه.
For these reasons, I made a lot of progress in a short period of time, and I was the youngest female judge who became the head of the jurisdiction.
همه برای من آینده خوبی پیش بینی می‌کردن.
And everybody was foreseeing a very good future for me.
تا اینکه در سال 1979 انقلاب اسلامی شد.
Until we had the Islamic Revolution in 1979.
و بعد از انقلاب به من گفتن که چون تو زن هستی نمیتوانی شغل قضاوت داشته باشی برای اینکه در اسلام ممنوعه.
And after the revolution, I was told that because I was a female, I could not be a judge anymore because this was forbidden under Islam.
و من شدم منشی همان دادگاهی که روزی رئیسش بودم.
And therefore, I became a secretary in the same court that I had presided over one day.
من این ظلم رو قبول نکردم و تقاضای بازنشستگی زودتر از موعد کردم آمدم بیرون.
I did not accept that decision, and therefore I asked for anticipated retirement, and I left.
من شغل قضاوت رو خیلی دوست داشتم و الان هم عاشق این شغلم.
I liked very much to be a judge then, and right now I really love the profession also.
بنابراین روزی که شغل محبوب خودم رو از دست دادم با خودم گفتم کاری خواهم کرد که شما قبول کنید اشتباه کردید.
And therefore, the day that I lost my beloved profession, I decided that I would do something that would compensate for that, and that would be acceptable.
شروع کردم به کتاب نوشتن.
I started writing books.
برخی از کتاب‌های من خیلی جالب بود و به زبان‌های انگلیسی و فرانسه هم ترجمه شد.
Some of my books were very interesting, and they were even translated into English and French.
بعد دفتر وکالت خودم رو باز کردم و متمرکز شدم روی دفاع از قربانیان خشونت.
And afterwards, I opened my own practice, and I focused my work on defending victims of violence.
به تدریج شهرت بین‌المللی پیدا کردم.
Little by little, gradually, I gained international fame.
جایزه‌های زیادی بردم.
I also won a lot of prizes,
تا اینکه در سال 2003 جایزه صلح نوبل بردم.
which culminated in me winning the Nobel Prize in 2003.
وقتی که جایزه رو به من میدادن و من نطق میکردم از طریق ستلایت به همه جای دنیا پخش میشد.
Of course, my acceptance speech when they were giving the prize to me was disseminated everywhere in the world via satellite.
و میدونستم که در ایران هم مردم با ستلایت من رو میبینن و نطق من رو گوش میکنن.
And I knew that also in Iran, everybody could receive the speech via satellite, and that they were listening to what I was saying.
و مطمئن بودم یکی از اینا رئیس قوه قضاییه است.
And I was very sure that one of the people who was listening to my speech was the head of the judiciary.
و به خودم گفتم این همون روزی است که من انتظارش رو داشتم.
And then I said to myself, this is the very day that I had expected for myself.
رئیس قوه قضاییه الان فکر میکنه اگر ما مرتکب این اشتباه نشده بودیم و این رو بیرون نمیکردیم با افتخار میتونستیم بگیم برنده جایزه صلح قاضی دستگاه ماست.
And rest assured that the head of the judiciary must be telling himself, if we had not made that mistake and we had not dismissed her, now we would have a judge among us who was the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
منظور من از بیان این خاطره یک چیز مهمتری است.
The reason why I'm telling you, sharing with you this memory is a more important point.
و اون این است که هر شکست میتواند مقدمه پیروزی بزرگتری باشد.
And that is as follows. Any failure can be an introduction to a bigger victory.
Thank you. Thank you. Justice Northfleet.
Thank you very much, Justice Ginsburg. I think that the wise thing for me to do was just say nothing, because I have two giants here by my side, these two women that have inspired all of us for a long time. But I just want to share with the audience some of my experience in life. When I came out of law school, Justice Ginsburg, we couldn't apply for the examinations for the legal profession to become judges. The forms filed by women were just put aside with no explanation at all. We were not considered trustworthy to take such a hard job, difficult job as adjudicating. So in my country, Brazil, 30 years after that, exactly 30 years after my graduation, I was sitting at the Supreme Court. So this shows how much we have done in such a small period of time. Of course, 30 years is quite a lot in any individual's life, but in historical terms, it's a small period. We have done a good job in a short period of time. What worries me nowadays, and I would like to point this out, is that the younger generations, especially women of younger generations, they're taking for granted what was achieved. And we have difficulties in enrolling them in associations, in women's associations, because they think all the work has already been done. And it's not so. We can still feel discrimination against women in several occasions, including in the judicial branch. Justice Ginsburg and myself, we belong to an association of women judges. And one of the points that we try to pass to our fellow colleagues, male and female, is that whenever women come to court, they should be treated equally. Sometimes in testimony especially, the word of a woman is considered of less consistency than that of a man. And this is not only here and there, it pervades all and every judicial system. So there's still lots to do. As we saw here at the beginning of the conference, Bill Newcomb told us that there's still lots of things to do. So the same in our area of women's rights.
Justice Northfleet's remarks lead into my next question, which is, despite the exhilarating changes that I've seen in the United States, for example, when I became a lawyer, the statute books in our states and in the federal government were riddled with laws that distinguished on the basis of gender. There were many things that were off limits to women. All those overt bars are gone. What remains, let me mention two things. One is what I call unconscious bias. My best illustration of that is in my growing up years, I never saw a woman in a symphony orchestra. Someone came up with the brilliant but very simple idea of dropping a curtain between the person who was auditioning and the judges. Well, lo and behold, you began to see women members of symphony orchestras all across the United States. Now, when I was telling this story, a very talented young violinist said, "You left out one thing. When we go on stage to audition behind the curtain, we appear shoeless so the judges won't hear a woman's heels coming on stage." Well, in other fields, it's not quite as easy. The curtain can't be dropped. And my illustration of what I mean by unconscious bias was there was a case in the 1970s about women who worked for AT&T and said that they didn't have opportunities to advance to middle management. It turned out that the women did very well on all of the tests up to the last one. The last one was a total person test, and the interviewer would give a mark based on the total person. Well, not surprisingly, the people who passed the total person test looked like the interviewer. Women were different. They were not to be trusted the way someone who looked like the interviewer looked. There was a leading decision also in the 70s by the European Court of Justice involving a province in Germany that in fields where women had not been welcome in the past, if two candidates were approximately equal in quality, there was to be a plus for the woman. And the European Court of Justice upheld that mild preference, and in its judgment, it said, this may turn out to be no preference at all. It may be just overcoming the unconscious bias that exists. That's one problem, and the other major impediment for women's advancement today is what we call in the United States the work-life balance. My eyes were first opened to the potential that the world was missing by not giving women equal opportunities in Sweden in 1963. And Sweden was ahead of most countries. By then, it was expected that families would have two earners. Probably one factor in that was the inflation that existed. So it was accepted that both partners would work. But the woman was expected to buy the children's new shoes, take them for the medical checkups, have dinner on the table at 7. And there was a woman, a journalist, her name was Eva Moberg, and she wrote a column in the Stockholm paper to this effect: why should the woman have 2 jobs and the man only 1? I'm happy to see that more and more men are appreciating that they're losing out when one day their children are grown and they didn't have much to do with raising them. But that is a problem in the legal profession in the United States. It surprises me because now with the modern means of communication, one should be able to have a more flexible schedule and work at home and in the office. But in a lot of law offices, life isn't that way. So those are the impediments that I see: overcoming unconscious bias by decision makers and making it possible for both men and women to have a family life as well as a work life. Now, may I ask Dr. Ebadi?
من زندگی خانوادگی دارم، همسر و 2 دختر.
I do have a family life. I have a husband and 2 daughters.
دختران من خوشبختانه بزرگ شدن و هر دوتاشون PhD دارن، یکی در زمینه مخابرات و دیگری در حقوق.
My 2 daughters are grown, fortunately. Both of them have PhDs, one in communications and the other one in law.
همسر من مهندس، بنابراین 1 دختر شغل پدر رو انتخاب کرد و 1 دختر شغل مادر رو. می‌بینید که ما به عدالت اعتقاد داریم، دنیا رو نصف کردیم.
And my husband is an engineer, and as you can see, one daughter has chosen the profession of the father and one daughter has chosen the profession of the mother. So we are just. We have justice. We have divided the world into 2.
زمانی که بچه‌ها کوچک بودن من مثل یک زن سنتی همه کارهای خونه رو خودم انجام میدادم، از جمله آشپزی رو خودم میکردم.
When my children were small, however, I used to act like a very traditional wife. I had to do everything, all the housework, including cooking.
و هر وقت که اینا شامشون رو میخوردن و زندگی تموم میشد، من تازه از ساعت 10 شب به بعد شروع میکردم به نوشتن کتاب.
And whenever everybody had had their dinner, that's when my life would start. From 10 o'clock in the evening onwards, I would start writing my books.
و بسیاری از کتاب‌هام در نصف شب نوشته شد.
And many of my books actually were written after midnight.
اینطور زندگی کردن راحت نیست.
It's not easy to live like that, of course.
و هنر زن بودن یعنی این.
And that is perhaps what you can call the art of being a woman.
شما هم مادر خوب باشید و هم یک وکیل موفق.
That's to say, to be a good mother and at the same time be a successful lawyer.
من نمیدونم اصطلاح جنس ضعیف رو چه کسی برای زنها به کار برد.
I don't know who it was who the first time used this expression of weak sex for women.
به نظر من این جنس ضعیف این زنها هستن که قوی ترن.
In my opinion, I think that is a misnomer. It's women who are stronger.
و همین قدرت که به ما نیرو میده در اجتماع بریم جلو، ولی کم فراموش نکنیم یک مادر هم هستیم.
I think it's a sign of our strength that we can go ahead in society and make advances, and at the same time we do not forget that we are a mother as well.
من همیشه گفتم حقوق بشر از خانواده شروع میشه.
I have always said that human rights start in the family.
من نمیتونم بچه هام رو فراموش کنم و مدعی باشم که مدافع حقوق بشرم.
I cannot neglect my children and at the same time claim to be a defender of human rights.
من نمیتونم به امر تحصیل یا تغذیه کودکانم بی توجه باشم و فکر گرسنگی بچهای دنیا رو بکنم.
I cannot neglect the education and the food of my children and then claim that I defend education rights or nourishment for the rest of the world.
و زنها به نظر من این هنر رو دارن که بین خانه و اجتماع اون تعادل رو برقرار بکنن و هر دو کار رو انجام بدن.
And in my opinion, women do have this kind of art, this capability to create a balance between their family life, the house, and the society, and to create the balance and to move forward.
Thank you. I'd like to interject. I had the tremendous good luck to have a life partner for 56 years who was a much better cook than I was. And our division of labor in my early years, I was the everyday cook and he was the weekend and company cook. Along about my daughter's high school years, she was 15, 16, she noticed a distinct difference between daddy's cooking and mommy's cooking and decided that mommy should be phased out of the kitchen entirely, that daddy should become the everyday cook as well as the weekend cook. So since the year 1980, when I got my first good job as a judge on an intermediate appellate court in Washington, D.C., I have not cooked a meal. How do I survive today? My daughter, who learned it from her father and loves cooking, she comes once a month. She lives in New York. She comes to Washington, D.C., spends the whole day cooking, makes individual meals for me, and that's what I live on until she comes back the next month. Justice Northfleet.
Well, I think I wouldn't have survived if I had to do what Dr. Ebadi just told us. Fortunately, in my time with a small child, I had the help of my mother, and she took care of my my young daughter so that I could lead a very active professional life. Also, we have in Brazil still help. We can easily get help. And that is one of the reasons why when I took office as a Chief Justice in 2006, in my speech, I made a point of thanking, because I thought I was representing all the professional women in Brazil, and I made a point of thanking all the other women that helped us to get to that positions that we now could afford to have. So it is really a problem, Justice Ginsburg, still today for young professionals to try to manage 2 jobs, even 3. Sometimes you're, like in our field, a judge and a university professor, and then you have all the responsibilities about your children, your home, and your husband. It's not very easy to find a companion that would really share these responsibilities. It's not easy to this day. It has become much better since the old times, but men still don't have the necessary skills or the necessary force to do all the things, all the different jobs that we take during the day. So for women, for professional women, it is absolutely necessary that we try to enforce public policies that would allow us to leave our kids with good providers of care. And this doesn't happen, at least in my country. So it is a point where many talents get lost because they have to stay at home and take care of the children.
I'd like to turn to a question about affirmative action and parity. In the United States, in recent years, there has been a backlash against affirmative action of any kind, whether for minorities or for women. I came here from Paris and was asking how is this parity system working out, where party lists are required to alternate male-female candidates, and in the private sector, 40% of the corporate boards, 40% must be women. It can go higher, but not lower. The system is not perfect. There is some slippage, but it has made an enormous difference. So a lawyer friend she now sits on 3 corporate boards. She is invited to serve on many more, but she's doing what she thinks she can responsibly do. What do you think of that notion of parity, of requiring in the private sphere as well as in the political arena?
Justice Ginsburg, if I may, we have this system of quotas for political office in Brazil. At least 30% of the candidates in each party should be women. And still, the political parties cannot reach that number. Year after year, they cannot reach that number. And why that? Because women do not apply for the positions. And why do women not apply to the positions? Because usually they don't have the financial resources for campaigning. This is one point where we women lack resources. We don't have the same connections as our male counterparts. Men usually get out of work and they go have a beer or have listen to a football games with their pals, and they have these informal connections that at the end of the day make for a larger network. So whenever they want to run for office, they have this, this net to draw from. While women still, we go from job to home, from home to job. And we don't work our network connections very well. We still haven't had the opportunity to do this. That's what I think.
In the United States, it's probably unthinkable that we could get a parity system going, but looking at the federal judiciary, it wasn't until President Jimmy Carter that women showed up in numbers on the bench, and that's because Carter was aware of this unconscious bias. He looked around at the federal judges and he said, you know, they all look like me, but that's not what the great United States looks like. So he made it a point to appoint women in numbers, members of minority groups in numbers, and no president ever went back to the way it was. The women on the Supreme Court, now there are 3 of us, have an annual dinner with our counterparts in the Senate. When we started, I think there were 6 women, and now there's something like 18 or more. It's still a long way to go, but definitely it's moving in the right direction. Dr. Ebadi, do you want to make any comment on parity systems, attempt to get women in leadership roles?
معمولاً هر وقت صحبت از سهمیه جنسیتی مثبت برای زنان میشه، همونطوری که گفتید بعضی‌ها مخالفن.
Of course, whenever we talk about positive gender parity in favor of women or positive action, there are people who disagree with it.
اما فراموش نکنیم که این مخالفت‌ها ناشی از چیست؟
But we must not forget what the root of the disagreements are.
این مخالفت‌ها ناشی از یک فرهنگ پدرسالاری است که می‌ترسه قدرتش رو از دست بده.
These disagreements arise from a paternalistic culture where men are afraid of losing their power.
و بایستی مفهوم این فرهنگ پدرسالار رو ما برای همه توضیح بدیم.
And it is up to us to clarify and to explain the meaning of this paternalistic culture for everybody.
و بگوییم که فرهنگ پدرسالار به معنای ضدیت با مرد نیست.
And we have to explain that if you have a paternalistic culture, it doesn't mean that you are in conflict with men.
بلکه یک فرهنگ غلطی است که برابری انسان‌ها رو قبول نداره.
Rather, it is a wrong kind of a culture which does not accept the equality of the human race.
و اگر معتقد به برابری باشیم، بایستی به این مسئله نگاه کنیم که زنها به خاطر بزرگ کردن بچه و مسائل خانوادگی مسئولیت بیشتری دارند.
And if we believe in equality, we have to admit that women do have a greater responsibility because of taking care of the house and because of bringing up the children.
و در حقیقت سهمیه مثبتی که برای زنها در نظر گرفته میشه برای ایجاد این برابری است.
And therefore, any kind of affirmative action for women is actually to reach this goal, this kind of equality.
یعنی در حقیقت با سهمیه مثبت ما ارزش گذاری میکنیم وظایف دوگانه‌ای که یک زن در خانه و در اجتماع داره.
Is to say that through exerting affirmative action, we actually honor the dual role that women have both in the house and in society.
و باید باشه این سهمیه، این ارزش گذاری باید اتفاق بیفته.
And therefore this should happen, we should honor it.
و حتی در قانون اساسی کشورها باید این مسئله قید بشه که نمایندگان که زنان در مجالس قانونگذاری و در باید سهمیه داشته باشند.
And it's something that I think should also be stipulated in the constitution of countries. There should be a quota for the participation of women in decision-making bodies in parliaments.
در خاورمیانه در افغانستان سهمیه مثبت به نفع زنان در پارلمان گذاشتن.
In Afghanistan, for example, there is this kind of positive parity for women in the parliament.
و این البته مثبت بود.
And of course, it has had positive results.
برای اینکه اگر این سهمیه نبود حتی یک زن هم نمیتوانست وارد پارلمان بشه.
Because if there had not been this quota, not even one woman would have been able to become a member of the parliament.
حالا زنها در پارلمان ممکنه قدرتشون در پارلمان افغانستان کم باشه، اما حضور اونها مهمه.
Of course, it is possible that women in the parliament in Afghanistan do not enjoy the same powers as men do. However, their presence itself is powerful.
And now I'm going to bring up a question. I consider myself in many ways a very privileged woman. Women in the United States nowadays have opportunities they never had before, but there are many places in the world where you can have formal equality and the best laws, and it won't make any difference because the formal laws don't touch the everyday life of many women. Customary law has a much bigger impact on their day-to-day lives than any laws passed by a parliament. And so we know that women around the world are subject to many things that we would consider horrendous. Child marriage is one. A tendency in some societies to think girls are not worth much. And I'd like to ask if you have any ideas about how to elevate the status of women who are in societies where they are tremendously oppressed.
تغییر نگرش نسبت به زنان به دو صورت امکان پذیره.
To change the attitude towards women, it can be possible in two ways.
اول توانمندسازی خود زن هاست.
First is the empowerment of women themselves.
بایستی به زنها اعتماد به نفس بدیم.
We have to give confidence to women.
و اعتماد به نفس زنها از استقلال اقتصادی شروع میشه.
And their confidence comes from financial independence.
اگر قرار بشه یک زن برای برطرف کردن کوچکترین احتیاجاتش به شوهر یا به پدرش مراجعه بکنه، هیچ وقت اعتماد به نفس به دست نمیاره.
A woman will never find confidence if for meeting the smallest needs in her life she will have to go to her father or to her husband.
بنابراین این که ما بتوانیم زنها رو به بازار کار برسانیم خیلی مهمه.
Therefore, it is very important to try to help women enter the workforce.
در خیلی از جوامع هستن که زنهای تحصیل کرده زیادی دارن، ولی که بازار کار بر روی زنان بسته است.
There are countries where you have very educated women. However, they cannot enter the market to work.
به عنوان مثال نگاه کنید در امارات متحده عربی.
For example, we can look at the United Arab Emirates.
تعداد زنهایی که از دانشگاه فارغ التحصیل میشن با درصد زنهایی که کار میکنند چقدر تفاوت داره؟
There is a big gap between the number of women who graduate from universities and the number of women who are actually working in the marketplace.
و اون زنی که تحصیلات دانشگاهی داره وقتی که میره خونه باز هم برای اداره امور خودش احتیاج داره که از شوهرش پول بگیره.
And therefore, even the woman who has graduated from university and has university education, still when she goes back home to meet her own needs, she will have to depend on her husband.
مسئله دیگر این است که در سطح جامعه بایستی کارهای فرهنگی صورت بگیره.
The other point is that at the level of society, cultural things have to come together.
و بایستی نگرش منفی نسبت به توانایی زن را از بین ببرید.
And something that we have to uproot is the negative attitude towards the capabilities of women.
و این از حتی کودکی شروع میشه.
And this is something that we can do even from childhood.
در کتاب‌های دبستانی هر وقت توی کشور من میخوان صحبت از زن بکنن، زن رو در آشپزخانه نشان میدن و مرد رو در محیط کار.
For example, in school textbooks, when they want to depict a woman, you can see the woman always in the kitchen, but you can also always see the man in the marketplace.
این در حقیقت فرهنگ غلط از همینجا شروع میشه.
And therefore, the wrong culture regarding this issue starts right then.
که ما به یک بچه 6 ساله میگوییم که زن جاش توی آشپزخانه است.
That's to say, we inculcate in a 6-year-old child that the place of a woman is in the kitchen.
کتاب‌های آموزشی بایستی اصلاح بشه.
Therefore, the textbooks have to be modified.
فیلم‌ها بایستی اصلاح بشه.
The films have to be changed.
و در تمامی زمینه‌های فرهنگی بایستی تغییر نگرش پیش بیاد.
And a lot of changes regarding the attitude have to take place in all cultural areas.
اما این چگونه ممکنه؟
But how will we do it? How is it possible?
من از کشور خودم ایران شروع میکنم.
I will start with my own country, Iran.
در ایران جنبش فمینیستی برای این تغییر نگرش خیلی ابتکارات به خرج داده و فعالیت کرده.
In Iran, the feminist movement has made a lot of initiatives in this respect and has come up with a lot of ideas.
اما از سمت دیگه ما با حکومتی مواجه هستیم که مایل نیست این تغییر صورت بگیره.
However, on the other hand, we face a government that is not interested in any of these changes.
و اینجاست که این اختلاف بین جنبش فمینیستی و حکومت پیش میاد.
And that's when we have a problem between the feminist movement and the government.
و این باعث شده که تعدادی از فمینیست‌های ما الان در زندان باشن.
And because of the same thing, a number of feminists are now in prison.
به هر حال غیر از اینکه روی جامعه کار بکنیم راه حل دیگری نیست.
In any event, there is no other alternative but to work on the society.
من مایل هستم خاطره ای رو براتون بگم.
At this point, I would like to share a memory with you.
من 6 ماه قبل در لیبریا بودم که کشوری است در آفریقا.
And 6 months ago, I was in Liberia, which is of course a country in Africa.
و در اونجا به من گفتن که بیش از 50% زنان ختنه شدند.
And over there, I was informed that more than 50% of women have been circumcised.
و وقتی که من از رئیس جمهورش که برنده جایزه صلح نوبل هم هست پرسیدم چرا ختنه زنان را غیر قانونی اعلام نمی کنید به من پاسخ داد.
And when I asked the president, who is also a woman and is also a winner of the Nobel Prize, why she would allow this to continue and why this kind of mutilation was not declared to be illegal, this was her answer to me.
گفتش که در ایران گفت در این کشور حتی زنانی هستن که خودشون داوطلبانه میرن ختنه میشن برای اینکه مردهای این کشور حاضر نیستن با زنی که ختنه نشده ازدواج کنن.
She said that there are women in this country who themselves would volunteer to be circumcised because there are men who would not marry a woman who has not gone through this procedure.
و ما قبل از اینکه قانون رو عوض بکنیم بایستی فرهنگ رو عوض بکنیم.
And therefore, before we modify the laws and change them, we have to be able to modify the culture and change the culture.
و راست میگفت.
And I think she was right.
برای اینکه فایده نداره که این عمل رو غیر قانونی بکنن اما مردها حاضر به ازدواج با یک زنی که ختنه نشده نباشن.
Because there is no use to declare it illegal and you still have men who would not marry women who have not been circumcised.
بنابراین باید رو فرهنگ کار کرد.
Therefore, we have to work on the culture.
البته برای تغییر فرهنگ از ابزار قانون هم میتوان استفاده کرد.
Of course, to change the culture, you can benefit and be assisted by the instruments of the law.
اما فرهنگ کارهای زیربنایی تری رو میکنه.
But if you change the culture, you would be able to change things, the infrastructure you'll be able to change.
Justice Northfleet.
Yeah, no doubt there are two levels here. One is the legal and constitutional level, and the other is the behavioral level of each society, the culture that's present in that society. And I doubt whether all of us that are in the legal profession can find around the world any legislation that endorses the idea that women are inferior. There's no legislation to this that saying that, and all religions do not endorse the idea of women being inferior. It is sometimes said that in Islam women are considered to be inferior, but that's not true. The Prophet himself was married to a businesswoman. The Prophet himself had women in his inner circle and discussed the doctrine with women. So this idea comes from the behavior in a society and at some point the necessity of one group to get hold of power and keep women in an inferior position. But there is also something that should be considered. Whenever we have oppression for a long, long time over a society or a group in society, and this is the same with the history of the colonial empires, it takes a long time for those who were oppressed for a long time to come of age, to discover their worth and to believe in themselves. So the same happens, I think, with women. We have to this day in our societies women that are in different levels of consciousness about their own worth. And we still have some of our fellow sisters that accept subservient places in society, subservient roles in society. And this is where I think we should give much attention and have some work done to raise the awareness of women about their conditions in society.
I'd like to leave some time to invite questions from you, so I will ask just one last question. We were all women judges, and I am sometimes asked, well, what difference does it make? There is a judge from the state of Minnesota who gave an answer to that question. Justice O'Connor and I have often repeated, and she said, at the end of the day, a wise old man and a wise old woman will reach the same judgment. I think she's right about that. On the other hand, I do think there is something that we women contribute to the justice system that would be absent without us. We bring an intelligence that our male colleagues lack. And so I would like each of you to respond to that question. Does it make a difference? I remember in the 70s when we were bringing cases challenging the absence of women from juries in the United States. States into as late as the 1970s still did not call women for jury duty on the same basis as men. And I was arguing a case before the court on which I now serve, and one of the justices said, well, you say that women are equal to men, so you have a jury of your peers. If men and women are equal, then why do you need women on the jury? Because males are their peers. Well, that was, I think, not a serious question, and the court did come out the right way and pointed out that if you are a citizen of a society, you have obligations as well as rights. And if women are not called for jury duty, then the state is saying they are expendable. We need the men for a system of justice. We don't need the women. So does it make a difference to have women in decision-making places, and particularly women in the judiciary?
من معتقد هستم محرومیت زنان از قوه قضاییه در حقیقت یک توهین است به زن.
I personally think that the deprivation of women or their absence from the judiciary is actually an insult to women.
برای اینکه ما در حقیقت میگوییم زنها نمیتوانند ولو اینکه دانشکده حقوق رو تمام کرده باشند قانون رو اجرا بکنن و عدالت رو اجرا بکنن.
Because actually what we will be saying is that although women might have finished the law school and despite their education they will not be capable of carrying out justice and to make decisions.
و این حرفی است که در ابتدای انقلاب به من زدن.
And this was exactly what I was told at the beginning of the revolution.
گفتن که در اسلام گفتن که زنها نمیشود عدالت رو اجرا بکنن.
I was told that according to Islam, women are not capable of carrying out justice.
و این حرف کاملا نادرسته.
And this is of course completely incorrect.
برای اینکه با استفاده از کتاب‌های دینی من ثابت کردم که میتوانند و برخلاف شریعت هم نیست.
Because based on religious books, I proved that women can do that, and there is nothing in the Sharia which says otherwise.
فقط مسئله سر نگاه کردن به شریعته.
The only thing is how you interpret the Sharia, how you look at it.
بنیادگراها شریعت رو طوری تفسیر میکنن که منافع خودشون و عقاید خودشون رو ثابت بکنن.
Fundamentalists interpret the Sharia in such a way that only meets their own interests and their own requirements.
و الان در برخی از کشورهای اسلامی قاضی زن داریم.
We see female judges in some Islamic countries.
بنابراین اونهایی که معتقدند در اسلام زن نمیتونه قاضی باشه یه تفسیر غلط دارن.
And therefore those who interpret the Sharia as not allowing women to be judges have the wrong interpretation.
و من برای بنیادگراهای اسلامی که زن رو ضعیفتر میدانند و ناتوانتر میشمارند یک سوال دارم.
And I have a question for Muslim fundamentalists who consider women inferior or the weaker sex.
همه ما رو یک خدا آفریده.
All of us have been created by the same God.
و آیا شما که مسلمان هستید معتقدید که خداوند در خلقت من به عنوان یک زن مرتکب اشتباه شده؟
And you as Muslims, do you believe that when creating me as a woman, God made a mistake?
و من رو احمق‌تر فرض کرده، احمق‌تر ساخته؟
And has created me more stupid than you?
این در حقیقت توهین به اون خدایی است که تو اعتقاد داری.
This is in effect an offense towards the God in which you believe.
و بنیادگراهای اسلامی مراقب باشند که نباید به خدا توهین بکنند.
And of course, this is a warning to Muslim fundamentalists. They should not insult God.
و ضعیف شمردن زنها اهانت به خداست.
And to consider women as inferior, that would be an offense to God.
I do believe that women bring a different view into the legal profession, and especially as judges. To draw from my experience in court, and I've been for 22 years a judge, I myself had a great interest in changing the praxis, in looking into the details, which is something very feminine. My male colleagues usually tend to see the large picture, the theoretical big questions, and the constructions, the intellectual construction of the law, which is absolutely necessary in our day-to-day job. But I think that women give more attention to details. I don't know whether my colleague here present agrees with me, but the fact that we have women in courts nowadays in Brazil, we're 26% in the first instance and almost 30% in the appellate level, gives the courts a much wider understanding of what is day-to-day life. We women, we bring this attention to details, attention to the human being, as our Archbishop of Cape Town mentioned, the attention to the human being behind all the beautiful theories of law.
Thank you both enormously for your contributions. And now we have, maybe 15, 20 minutes left. I see someone has a microphone. So if you have a question, would you please go to the microphone and ask it?
Distinguished panelists, Laurel Bellows, President of the American Bar Association, what a joy it is to have you with us today, speaking so directly. My question is an offshoot of Justice Northfleet's observation that awareness is a good part of the fact that barriers persist and progress is not as rapid as many of us would like. So the question is, how do we support women to be more vocal in our countries about the need for gender equality? Does it help that some of our countries have formal equality, that there are constitutions that confirm that men and women are equal? Does it hurt that there are some countries that don't have formal equality? Is there a way of ratcheting up the level of voice internationally or within our nations about the lack of progress to attain equality between men and women?
Would you like to say something?
Yeah.
Well, to answer your question, I think that one of the big problems, and I mentioned it before, is that the younger generation thinks that all that was necessary to do is already done, and women are already there. And sometimes our male colleagues also think that if you have a token woman at a position in a board or in a corporate position, then that's enough. And sometimes when the numbers get higher, you have instead of just 1, 2, 3, 4, they tend to say, well, we have too many women. So it's a big, long struggle. We shouldn't think that the work is done. We still have to reach out, especially to the younger generations, and make them aware of the rights that they should maintain and struggle to get better.
Laurel, I must say that although there's a long way to go, imagine, I never had a woman teach me. It was unheard of for a woman to teach law. My entering class in law school had over 500 people, and only 9 of them were women. Only 1 of them was an African American. I think we have come a long way from the way it once was. I think that any woman in a position of authority, if she cares about the well-being of her nation, will try to set an example in her own hiring. The first woman who was ever a federal trial court judge, Bernita Shelton Matthews, she was appointed in 1948. She hired only women as her law clerks. Why? Because her male colleagues hired no women. And she said she always thought she had the better of the bargain. I have made it a point to hire as law clerks people who have children. The first one was a man who was the primary caretaker of his children. The last term, I had one woman with a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old. I never felt shortchanged. Somehow she managed to do the job. So I think women who are in positions of authority have an obligation to show her colleagues that women are every bit as good as men and able to do the work.
من فکر میکنم که برای اینکه وقت بیشتری داشته باشیم، چون شما 2 نفر سوال کردین، از اجازه بدیم که دیگران سوال کنن.
I think that I will forgo talking myself because I think we should have more time for more questions because 2 other people have responded to this question already.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I'm Beatrice from the United States, originally from Cameroon. I'm very impressed to come to a panel where there's such wonderful, intelligent, and influential women. I'm just trying to find out how you as women who are in charge of justices in the world can forge peace in humanity despite the differences that we have, since we are all children of God, and even if the religions are different and we have different cultures, how can you make the difference in the world of today to forge a peace that is in a world that is actually dominated by men? Thank you very much.
Maybe we should have another question.
Yeah, I think the panel, in one way or another, has answered that question. One is you set an example by the way you live your own life, and if you're in a decision-making council, you urge the inclusion of women.
I wanted to of course quote that behind every great man, of course, there's a great woman, and behind every great woman, there's a lot of men who tried to hold her back. But I wonder why the first generation of women leaders tended to look as they did. I'm talking about Margaret Thatcher, Gandhi, Bhutto, people like this, Golda Meir. And they tended to be maybe a little bit of alpha males themselves. They were more militaristic, perhaps. And I wonder if women to succeed have to sometimes behave more like men, particularly in the arena of justice and politics.
Well, I think you have 3 examples before you that know you don't have to look like men or act like men.
It would make no difference at all if we mimetized the way of being of our male colleagues. I think we have different personalities, and that's the richness of diversity.
I have a question. What an honor to listen to all 3 of you. I have a question that's come up implicitly, but I'm curious to hear you take it on. I'm over here.
Where are you? Oh.
In feminist theory, there's sort of 2 big camps. There's equality feminists, sometimes called equality feminists, who basically have the view that gender is a social construct, and as much as possible, we should transcend gender, we should reduce its significance in society. And then there's another camp, which is sometimes called difference feminism, and the view there is that there is some essential perspective to that women have. Perhaps you mentioned, ma'am, Justice Northfleet, you mentioned an attention to detail. Some people talk about empathy and the experience of motherhood. And that view, the difference feminist view, is that we ought to make more space for womanness in social policy and in society. And I was curious to hear where your own views about feminism lie on that spectrum and how those views inform your ideas about law.
I think both schools have a part of the truth. The notion that so-called, what did you call it, equal, that was something that I heard very often during the 70s, and I thought, frankly, it was an unfair comment of what feminists in my generation was about. Our notion was always, in the words of a Marlo Thomas song, free to be you or me, free to be whatever you want to be, whether you're a man or a woman, and not be held back by artificial barriers, man-made barriers. So the notion really was never, we want women to be just like men. We want women to be free to be themselves, just as we want men to have that choice, to use whatever God-given abilities they have and take it as far as they can without encountering an artificial barrier. So I think that the labeling the 2 schools the way they are, each has part of the truth, but not the whole truth.
And if I may, the idea behind these theories is that each human being should be encouraged to take his or her talents to the limits. It doesn't mean that you have to mimetize one or the other. You just have to be a full human being.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon again to distinguished speaker. For 30 years in my activist life, this is the first time I really enjoyed it. The leaders, the women leaders, the mothers, the leader mothers, the women whom they are helping the others, whom they have helped the others. We can see that. And also today, I have got the encouragement for being a leader in the future as a mother, as a woman from a country which in all over the world, they are famous in the housekeeping the women, barriers for the women, and also not allow them to work, not allow them to go out, not allow them to participate in social life. میخوایم که سوال خود مشخصاً از جناب خانم شیرین عبادی، زنی که آرزو داشتم اینا را از نزدیک ببینم. امروز شما را ملاقات نه بلکه زیارت میکنم. خوش هستم من حیث یک زن افغان که زنی را که بارها به خاطر موفقیتش اشک ریختیم، امروز رو روبرو میبینم. زنی که با تمام مشکلات، با تمام ناملایمات، با تمام مشکلی که یک زن شرقی داره او رو شما داشتین، یک زن افغان داره او رو شما من حیث زن ایرانی داشتین، یک زن پاکستانی داره او رو شما من حیث زن ایرانی داشتین. از تمام از اون ناملایمات بیرون برآمدین و بالاخره جایزه را به دست آوردین که یک زن افغان که من صفیه صدیقی هستم افتخار میکنم به اینکه خواهرم به خاطر تمام مشکلاتی که داشت یک موفقیت بزرگ به دست آورده. امیدوار هستم که در مورد از اینکه شما صحبت کردین چقدر مشکلات داشتین در ساحه کار، در دفتر، به خاطر کارتان، میخوایم بفهمم که زندگی خانوادگیتان چقدر اثر گوارا و ناگوار بر شخصیت امروزی شما داشته. آیا شوهرتان، برادرتان و کسای دیگه که male member of your family چقدر سر شما تاثیر ناگوار داشتن و یا تاثیر موفقیت شما در وجود از اونا تبلور کرده یا نکرده؟ اینو میرم میخوایم بفهم. Thank you very much.
May I ask if we can have some help because
Well, the first part was to express her happiness that she's face to face with Mrs. Ebadi. She's a role model. Mrs. Ebadi is somebody that she always wanted and had longed to see, and today she's very happy that at long last this opportunity has arisen for her to see Mrs. Ebadi. But the question is that Mrs. Ebadi said that in her office, in her practice as a woman, as a professional woman, she had lots of problems and she had to struggle a lot. And the lady wants to know what kind of an impact, either positive or negative, it had on the family life. How did the husband react? How did the brother react? How did it have an impact on her family life?
خیلی ممنونم از محبتی که به من دارید.
Thank you very much for your kind words.
و در مورد زندگی خودم بایستی اضافه کنم که من در ابتدا شروع کردم که در یک خانواده مدرن مسلمان به دنیا آمدم.
As my life story, as I was telling you, I started off by saying that I was born in a modern Muslim family.
پدر من واقعاً به برابری اعتقاد داشت. همون آزادی هایی رو به من میداد که برای برادرم قائل بود.
My father truly believed in equality between the girls and the boys, and therefore I had the same freedom that my brothers had.
همسر من هم خوشبختانه یک مرد روشنفکری است. همون هرچند که تمام مثل یک زن سنتی تمام کارهای خونه رو من میکنم، اما او خیلی راحت با شغل من کنار آمد.
My husband, fortunately, is also a very enlightened person, and although I performed very well as a traditional wife at home as well, but he did not have any problems with me acting as a professional woman in the office.
من اوقات زیادی رو در شبانه روز صرف کارم میکردم، 15-16 ساعت.
I would spend a lot of time during the day on my professional side of life. I would spend 15-16 hours a day perhaps.
و همسر من هیچ وقت شغل من رو رقیب خودش ندونست.
However, my husband never considered my profession to be his competitor or rival.
و وقتی که من مشهورتر از همسرم شدم، گاهی از اوقات همسرم رو به نام خانوادگی من صدا می‌کردن، یعنی میگفتن آقای عبادی، در که اون فامیلش چیز دیگه است.
And when I became more famous than he is, at times he was called with my family name. They would call him Mr. Ebadi, whereas his family name is different from mine.
هیچ وقت همسرم از این مسئله ناراحت نشد و اون رو توهینی نسبت به خودش ندانست.
But he never got upset because of this, and he never considered this as an offense to himself.
و در حقیقت من قسمت بزرگی از پیروزی خودم رو مدیون پدر و همسرم می‌دارم.
In truth, I am indebted for a large part of my victory to my father and my husband.
و اگر من اجازه داشته باشم چند کلمه میخوام راجع به فرهنگ پدرسالار صحبت کنم.
If you allow me, I would like to say a few words about the paternalistic culture that I was talking about before.
Yes, just a few minutes because we're just about out of time.
میگن چقدر چند دقیقه برای وقتمون تمام.
اون چه که ما باهاش مخالفیم فرهنگ پدرسالاره.
What we disagree with is this paternalistic culture.
منظور من از فرهنگ پدرسالار جنس مذکر نیست، بلکه فرهنگی است که برابری انسانها را قبول نداره.
And by that I do not mean the male gender. What I mean is a culture which does not believe in the equality of human beings.
زنان هرچند قربانیان این فرهنگ غلط هستند، اما متاسفانه انتقال دهنده این فرهنگ غلط هم هستند.
Although women are unfortunately the victims of this culture, but ironically they are also the ones who transfer this culture to others.
فراموش نکنیم که هر مرد زورگویی به هر حال در دامن یک زن تربیت شده.
We should not forget that any oppressive man was brought up by a woman.
من فرهنگ پدرسالار رو تشبیه میکنم به بیماری هموفیلی.
My analogy with the paternalistic culture is the same as with hemophilia, as a disease.
هموفیلی یک بیماری ژنتیکیه که در اون یک زخم کوچک میتواند خونریزی زیادی تولید کنه.
Hemophilia is a genetic disease whereby a small wound can create a very important considerable bleeding.
و این بیماری همیشه از طرف مادر منتقل میشه.
And this is a disease which is always transferred by the female, by the mother.
زنی که این ژن بیماری رو داره، اولاد پسرش بیمار میشه، نه اولاد دخترش.
A woman who has this gene in her would transfer it not to the son but to the daughter. Not to the daughter but to the son.
و در حقیقت فرهنگ پدرسالار هم اینطوری منتقل میشه.
And in effect, the paternalistic culture is transferred in the same way.
بنابراین اون چه که مهمه آموزش این فرهنگ غلط به همه مخصوصا زن هاست.
Therefore, what is important is to educate everybody, especially women, about this wrong culture.
تا اینکه اونها بدونن چگونه با این فرهنگ غلط مبارزه بکنن.
So that they know how to combat and to fight this wrong culture.
این فرهنگ غلط در همه جا خودشو نشون میده.
This wrong culture can rear its head everywhere.
و از هر چیزی برای توجیه خودش استفاده میکنه.
And uses everything to justify itself.
از جمله از مذهب.
For example, religion.
مخصوص اسلام هم نیست.
And it is not something which is endemic to Islam.
در همه ادیان میبینید که گناهکار اصلی یک زنه، حوا.
In all religions we see that the original sin was committed by one person, a female, Eve.
و به خاطر گناه یک زن است که همه ماها از بهشت رانده شدیم.
And it's because of the sin of one woman that all of us were driven out of paradise.
این حرف رو کی زده؟
Who has said this?
کی بهشت رو دیده؟
Who has seen the Garden of Eden?
منظور از گناه چیه؟
What is meant by sin?
اینها تفسیرهایی است از کتاب مقدس که به وسیله کسانی که فرهنگ پدرسالار دارن ارائه شده.
This is an interpretation of the holy book or holy books presented by those who follow the paternalistic culture.
بنابراین تعجب نکنید اگر زنهایی هستند که وقتی به قدرت میرسن بدتر از مردا عمل میکنن.
Therefore, we should not be surprised if we see that certain women, when they come to power, they try to bend over backwards to act like men.
مسئله جنسیت نیست.
The point is not the gender.
مسئله طرز تفکره.
The point is the mentality.
ما بایستی معتقد به برابری انسان ها باشیم.
We should really all believe in the equality of human beings.
خیلی از ما زنها وقتی که در خانواده با دخترمون طور دیگری رفتار میکنیم که با پسرمون.
Many of us women we treat our daughters differently than we do treat our sons.
در حقیقت ما هستیم که بچه‌هامون رو پیرو این مکتب بار میاریم.
And therefore we are the ones who promote this kind of culture among our children.
ما میتونیم پسرمون رو یک سیاستمدار و یا یک دکتر ماهر تربیت کنیم.
We can educate our sons to be a skillful politician or a doctor.
اما این ژن معیوب رو هم بهش بدیم.
But at the same time, we can also transfer this defective gene to them.
و اینجاست که من میگویم مسئولیت زنها 2 برابره.
And it's at this point that I always say the responsibility of women is twofold.
I think that's a great note on which to end this session, which has already run a little past its time. So I thank Dr. Ebadi and Justice Northfleet for what has been, for me, a very stimulating conversation.
What an inspiring program. It is such a treat to be able to spend so much time to share ideas with 3 people, 3 women who are heroines for all of us. Let me make a quick announcement for this evening. We invite you to our evening programming, including sessions here at the World Forum beginning at 6. These are our salon sessions. If you plan to attend the film screening of Beatrice Matetwa and the Rule of Law, please meet the transportation outside the front entrance of the World Forum at 6:30. And because of a strong interest in attending 2 particular programs, we are combining the sessions on private rule of law with Ann Kelly and the session on business and human rights with Mike Posner in the Oceana room, which is just down the hall here. There will be signs posted for that. If somebody has lost a cell phone, please see Nancy Ward here at the front. Dinner tonight is on your own, and we hope that you will get a chance to explore The Hague and continue the conversations that we've started today. And most importantly, we meet here again at 9 a.m. in the morning. So have a good evening, folks. Thank you.